Drill Sergeant Zix-Clar's antennae twitched in what his species considered a smirk as he watched the new batch of cadets filing into the Galactic Military Academy's infamous training grounds. His chitinous mandibles clicked together in what the universal translator helpfully converted to a chuckle, though it sounded more like someone trying to tap dance in steel boots on a marble floor. "Well, well, well," he chittered, his compound eyes scanning the line of trembling recruits. "What sorry excuse for genetic material has the galaxy dumped on my doorstep today?" His segmented arms crossed over his armored thorax, the morning light of 3 suns gleaming off his polished exoskeleton. That's when he saw it. Among the usual assortment of tentacled Krylorians, crystalline Vectorians, and gaseous Nebulons stood something that made even his hardy exoskeleton feel a touch too tight. A human. An honest-to-gravity human standing there in standard-issue cadet gear like she belonged. Alexandra Lex Blackwood stood at parade rest, looking about as concerned as someone choosing between vanilla and chocolate ice cream. Her dark hair was pulled back in what humans called a regulation bun, though to Zix-Clar it looked more like someone had tried to tie a knot with a black symbiote worm. "By the void," whispered Cadet Flix, a gelatinous blob who had the misfortune of standing next to Lex. "They actually let a Deathworlder in?" Their translucent form rippled with anxiety, nearly losing cohesion. The whispers spread faster than a plasma leak in 0G. "Deathworlder, Category 12 planet. Did you hear they drink acid for fun? I heard they sleep through radiation storms." "My cousin's roommate said they eat solid food." Zix-Clar had heard the rumors, of course, everyone had. Humans came from a planet that should, by all reasonable scientific standards, be completely uninhabitable. Their homeworld, Earth, was a nightmare cocktail of lethal conditions, crushing gravity, toxic oxygen levels, extreme temperature variations, and aggressive indigenous life forms that would give a Krylorian war beast nightmares. "Silence!" Zix-Clar's voice boomed across the training grounds, causing several of the more sensitive cadets to flinch, molt, or in one unfortunate case, accidentally teleport 3 feet to the left. "You're here for Hell Week, cadets, 7 days of the most grueling, intense, soul-crushing training the galaxy has to offer. Many of you will fail, some of you will cry, at least one of you will probably try to evolve into a higher form of consciousness to escape." He paused for dramatic effect, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction at the wave of fear that rippled through the ranks. Only the human remained unmoved, and was she trying not to yawn? "This course has a 98% failure rate," he continued, stalking down the line. "It pushes you beyond your species' limits, beyond what you think possible, beyond—" He stopped in front of Lex, who was now definitely fighting back a yawn. "Is my briefing boring you, Cadet Blackwood?" "No, sir," Lex responded crisply, but her lips twitched in what humans called a smile. "Just excited to get started, sir." Zix-Clar's antennae flattened against his head. In his 20 cycles as a drill sergeant, he'd never met a cadet who was excited about Hell Week. Concerned? Yes. Terrified? Absolutely. One memorable time, spontaneously metamorphosed into an energy being, that too, but excited? "Well then, Deathworlder," he hissed, leaning in close enough that his mandibles nearly brushed her face. "Since you're so eager, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate the course for your fellow cadets?" The human's smile widened, showing off those unnervingly flat, omnivore teeth. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As Zix-Clar led the way to the course entrance, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. Behind him, he heard one of the Vectorian cadets crystallize in fear, their body turning into what would later be classified as a rather lovely specimen of anxiety-induced quartz. What Zix-Clar didn't know, what none of them knew, was that they were about to learn why humans had survived on their death trap of a planet for so long. And it had nothing to do with their physical capabilities. It was because humans, as a species, were absolutely positively insane. Drill Sergeant Zix-Clar stood before the massive holoscreen, his mandibles twitching with barely contained glee as he pulled up the course schematics. Behind him, the cadets had already started an illegal betting pool on how quickly the human would fail or die, though no one dared say that part out loud. 3 minutes, whispered a Krylorian, their tentacles wrapping around a credit chit. 1 minute, countered a Vectorian, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of smug certainty. I bet she makes it to the second obstacle, offered Flix, still maintaining a safe 3-meter distance from Lex. Attention! Zix-Clar's voice cut through the whispers. Behold, cadets, the gauntlet of galactic glory. He gestured dramatically at the holoscreen, which showed a sprawling maze of death and destruction that would make a black hole seem welcoming. First, he began, pointing to a series of platforms suspended over a bubbling pit. The acids of agony. One drop of this specially engineered compound can dissolve a Kraxan battle tank. The platforms are randomly electrified because why not? He glanced at Lex, expecting at least a flinch. Instead, she appeared to be taking notes. Next, the gravity gauntlet. The screen shifted to show a corridor with visible distortions in the air. Gravity shifts between 0.1 and 10 times standard every 3 seconds. Most species pass out or liquefy, sometimes both. He noticed Lex writing something that looked suspiciously like fun in her notepad. The vacuum vortex follows, where you'll experience the joy of near-space conditions without all that pesky protection. He paused for effect. The record for consciousness retention is 2.3 seconds. Lex raised her hand. Question, sir. Is that with or without holding our breath? The entire room fell silent. Even the ambient atmospheric processors seemed to pause in disbelief. With holding what? Zix-Clar's antennae crossed in confusion. Never mind, sir. Please continue. Lex's enthusiasm was starting to make several nearby cadets physically ill. Right. Zix-Clar shook his head and continued. The neural nightmare comes next. A psychic field that induces your species' worst fears. Following that, the molecular maze, where your very atoms might decide to take a vacation in another dimension. He pulled up the final section. And lastly, the pitch-black panic, a maze filled with predatory species from across the galaxy, all in complete darkness. The walls are coated with toxins that cause hallucinations, paralysis, and in one memorable case, spontaneous poetry. Throughout the entire briefing, Lex had been taking detailed notes, occasionally muttering things like, just like summer camp, and reminds me of high school gym class. Any questions? Zix-Clar asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Lex's hand shot up again. Yes, sir. Are we allowed to bring snacks? A Nebulon cadet actually dissipated in shock, their gaseous form temporarily losing coherence. Snacks? Zix-Clar repeated the word like it was a particularly offensive curse. Cadet Blackwood, this is a military training course designed to push the boundaries of sentient endurance, not a... Picnic? Lex offered helpfully. Yes, I mean no. Zix-Clar's exoskeleton was starting to change colors in agitation. This course has claimed the dignity of thousands of cadets. The last Krylorian who attempted it is still speaking in interpretive dance, a Vectorian crystallized so thoroughly they're now serving as a chandelier in the officers' mess. Lex nodded thoughtfully. So that's a no on snacks then? In the back of the room, the betting pool had shifted dramatically. Now cadets were wagering on how long it would take before Drill Sergeant Zix-Clar's head exploded. The course begins in 10 minutes, Zix-Clar managed through clenched mandibles. Standard safety protocols are in place. Emergency medical teams are standing by. Your species embassy has been notified and the necessary burial arrangements. Oh, perfect, Lex interrupted, already stretching her arms above her head. Plenty of time to warm up. Don't want to pull anything. A collective gasp went through the room. No one interrupted Drill Sergeant Zix-Clar. The last cadet who did ended up reassigned to gas giant atmospheric monitoring, and they were a gaseous being. Just one more thing, Lex added, bouncing lightly on her toes. Is there a time limit? The course is designed to take a week to complete, Zix-Clar replied, his voice flat with disbelief. The fastest completion time in history was 5 days, achieved by a hive mind that cheated by spreading itself across multiple bodies. Cool, Lex nodded, now doing what appeared to be jumping jacks. So if we finish early, do we get the rest of the week off? The betting pool exploded into chaos. Credits changed hands rapidly as new categories were hastily created. Time until human mental breakdown, number of medical evacuations required, and probability of course reconstruction needed. Zix-Clar stared at the human, his compound eyes trying to detect any sign of fear, concern, or basic survival instinct. He found none. Instead, she appeared to be humming. Yes, humming what the universal translator identified as something called Eye of the Tiger. Report to the starting line, Cadet Blackwood, he finally managed. May whatever deity you believe in have mercy on your soft, squishy soul." Lex grinned, saluted sharply, and jogged toward the course entrance. As she passed the other cadets, they heard her mutter, "Just like that ninja warrior course back home, but with better special effects." The medical team doubled their supply of sedatives. They had a feeling they'd need them, though whether for the human or the drill sergeant remained to be seen. The monitoring room erupted into chaos the moment Lex approached the first obstacle. Drill Sergeant Zix-Clar's mandibles clacked rapidly, the equivalent of a human stress-eating an entire bag of chips. She's not even wearing the acid protection suit," a medical officer shrieked, their tentacles writhing in distress. Indeed, Lex had taken one look at the bulky protective gear, muttered something about it cramping her style, and politely declined. Now she stood before the acids of agony, studying the pattern of electrified platforms with what could only be described as mild interest. "Beginning emergency protocols for—" Zix-Clar started, but was cut off by a whoop of joy. Lex had already started moving. No, not moving, dancing asterisk. She bounced between platforms with the grace of a sugar-rushed gymnast, occasionally adding unnecessary flips for style points. The acid below bubbled menacingly, but she paid it no more attention than a human might give a puddle after rain. "Impossible," a Vectorian observer crystallized, partially in shock. "The electrical current should have—" "Parkour!" Lex shouted, using one electrified platform as a springboard to launch herself into a triple backflip. "What's parkour?" someone whispered. "According to the database, it's a primitive Earth training method where humans deliberately make simple paths more difficult for fun." The analyst's voice cracked on the last word. Lex reached the end of the acid pit, turned around, and actually waved at the observation window. "That was awesome. Do you guys do birthday parties?" Zix-Clar's color had shifted to a concerning shade of puce. "Proceed to the gravity gauntlet," he managed through the comm system. "You got it, boss." The gravity shifts began immediately, a brutal sequence designed to disorient and incapacitate. Lex's response? She started timing her movements to the changes, using the high-gravity moments to build momentum and the low-gravity phases to execute what she called sweet aerial moves. She's treating it like a trampoline park," one observer noted, their psychic appendages drooping in disbelief. "What's a trampoline?" another started to ask, but was interrupted by Lex combining a gravity shift with a wall run that, according to several physicists present, should have been mathematically impossible. The vacuum vortex was next. Everyone leaned forward, certain that even a Deathworlder couldn't possibly— "Oh, cool, it's like swimming." Lex's voice came through the comms as she held her breath and literally breaststroked through the near vacuum. "We used to play games like this in the pool back home. Except, with more water and less space void." A medical officer fainted, another began updating their resume. The neural nightmare was supposed to be the breaking point, the psychic field activated, probing for her worst fears. "Huh," Lex commented casually while jogging through the fear-inducing barrier. "This kind of tickles. Reminds me of that time I stuck my tongue on a battery to win a bet." "The field is working," a technician confirmed, checking the readings. "It's showing her worst fear as deadline anxiety and student loan debt." "What manner of eldritch horrors are these?" someone whispered. The molecular maze posed a unique challenge. Its quantum uncertainties were supposed to be navigated using advanced probability computers. Lex's solution? She pulled out a coin. "Heads I go left, tails I go right," she announced cheerfully. "She's using random chance to navigate quantum uncertainties?" A physicist in the observation room began crying softly. "That's not— you can't just—" "Watch me," Lex called back, somehow hearing them through the supposedly soundproof barrier. She flipped the coin again, made a right turn, and somehow ended up exactly where she needed to be. "The universe itself is bending to accommodate her madness," Zix-Clar whispered in horror. Finally, the pitch-black panic, the most dreaded section where even the bravest warriors had been reduced to whimpering piles of regret. The lights went out, the predatory species were released, the toxic hallucination gas began to flow. "Marco!" Lex's voice echoed through the darkness. Silence. "Come on, you guys are supposed to say polo. Did no one here go to summer camp?" The observation room watched in infrared as Lex navigated the darkness by whistling and following the echoes. She occasionally stopped to pet some of the supposedly deadly predators, Or you're just a big space kitty, aren't you? Used the toxic wall coating to draw a smiley face, great grip texture, and somehow convinced a pack of Nexulian shadow stalkers to play fetch with her boot. Time check, someone squeaked. 47 minutes and 13 seconds since start, came the shaky reply. That's impossible. Zix-Clar's exoskeleton had developed stress fractures. The course requires complex calculations, advanced technology, years of training. Finished! Lex burst through the exit door, slightly dusty but grinning ear to ear. The Nexulian shadow stalkers bounded out behind her, now apparently domesticated. One of them was wearing her other boot as a hat. How did you? Zix-Clar couldn't even form complete sentences. Oh, it was super fun, Lex began counting off on her fingers. The acid pit was just like that hot lava game we played as kids. The gravity thing reminded me of the bounce house at my cousin's wedding. The vacuum part was basic swim team stuff, and the dark maze, classic hide and seek with extra steps. She paused, looking thoughtful. Though I gotta say, the hallucination gas could use some work. All it did was make everything look like a rave. Speaking of which, has anyone seen my boot? Mr. Snuggles here, she gestured to a particularly terrifying shadow stalker, seems pretty attached to it. The monitoring room had descended into chaos. Several observers had evolved into higher forms of consciousness, just to escape the reality of what they'd witnessed. The medical team was treating 3 cases of spontaneous molting, 5 reality denials, and 1 persistent case of existential hiccups. So, Lex asked brightly, what's next, and can I keep Mr. Snuggles? He followed me home. Zix-Clar stared at the human, then at the happily panting shadow stalker, then at his shattered worldview lying in pieces around him. I need to update the course parameters, he finally managed. Cool, while you do that, I'm going to teach these guys how to play frisbee. Lex pulled what appeared to be a metal dinner tray from somewhere and waved it enticingly at her new pack of deadly predator friends. Who's a good boy? Who wants the space frisbee? The last thing Zix-Clar saw before his emergency shutdown protocol activated was Lex teaching a group of the galaxy's most feared predators to sit, stay, and roll over. In the background, the betting pool had transcended normal mathematics and achieved consciousness of its own, now offering odds on things like probability of human accidentally becoming galactic empress and time until reality gives up and goes home. One brave soul checked the final time, 58 minutes and 42 seconds. A new record by approximately 6 days, 23 hours, and 1 minute. Somewhere in the universe, physics looked at the laws of reality, shrugged, and decided to take the rest of the day off. In the Academy's medical bay, a team of the galaxy's finest xenobiologists huddled around displays showing Lex's vital signs, their expressions ranging from horror to fascination to existential dread. Look at these readings, Dr. Vixatel, the head of xenomedicine, gestured frantically at the screens with 3 of their tentacles. The skeletal structure is reinforced with calcium actual mineral deposits inside the body. The epidermis has voluntary temperature regulation through something called sweating. And the cardiovascular system, by the void, it's basically a biological pump pushing liquid iron through their bodies. Meanwhile, in the commander's office, Drill Sergeant Zix-Clar was having his own crisis while reviewing the course completion statistics. Average completion time for Krylorians, 6.2 days, he muttered, clicking through holoscreens. Vectorians, 5.8 days. The legendary Quantum Knights of Nexus 7, 5.5 days. He pulled up Lex's time again, 58 minutes, 42 seconds. This has to be a malfunction. That's when the research team burst in with their findings about Earth. Sir, a junior researcher's antennae were practically tied in knots with excitement. We've been studying the human's background, and you won't believe what we found about their training facilities. The holoscreen flickered to life, showing images of Earth playgrounds. The entire room gasped. They call these jungle gyms, the researcher explained, voice trembling. They put their young on these metallic torture devices for entertainment. Those swinging seats, another analyst pointed at a swing set, they use them to simulate variable gravity conditions for fun. And this, the first researcher continued, pulling up footage of a children's obstacle course. They call it a bounce house. They deliberately create unstable terrain to improve their offspring's adaptation capabilities. Zix-Clar's mandibles dropped. You mean to tell me? Yes, sir. What we consider the galaxy's most grueling military training course is essentially a human playground. Back in medical, Lex was trying to explain to an increasingly distressed doctor why her heart rate had only doubled during the course. "Really, it's fine," she insisted as alarms blared around her. "This is nothing compared to that time I did a marathon dressed as a T-Rex." "A what? Dressed as a what?" Dr. Vixitel's color-shifting scales had settled on a concerning shade of puce. "Oh yeah, we do these things called fun runs, sometimes in costumes." The T-Rex suit actually helped with aerodynamics, surprisingly. The medical team frantically consulted their databases. "According to this," one nurse chittered nervously, "humans regularly engage in voluntary endurance activities called sports and exercise which, oh my, deliberately stress their bodies to improve performance." "Yeah," Lex brightened, "like CrossFit, though that's a bit extreme even for me." The nurse made the mistake of looking up CrossFit and promptly evolved into a higher plane of existence out of sheer self-preservation. Meanwhile, the Academy's environmental research team had made their own horrifying discoveries about Earth. "Their planet regularly experiences temperature swings of over 100 degrees, one researcher announced, trembling. "They have areas called deserts and tundras on the same planet. Their atmosphere is 21% oxygen," another shouted. "They live in a constant oxidizing environment. Everything is slowly burning all the time." "They have something called weather," a third wailed. "The sky just dumps water on them. Sometimes it turns the water into tiny ice crystals which they play in." Back in medical, Lex was getting antsy. "So am I cleared to go? I promised Mr. Snuggles and the gang I'd teach them how to play volleyball." Dr. Vixitel glanced at the pack of now domesticated Nexulian shadow stalkers, waiting patiently outside the medical bay, each wearing various pieces of sports equipment as hats. "Your internal temperature increased by 2 degrees during the course," they said weakly. "Oh yeah, I barely broke a sweat. Usually I need at least a 5K to get warmed up." The doctor's universal translator glitched trying to process this statement and began playing calming ocean sounds instead. Zix-Klar, having finally processed all this information, reached a conclusion that would revolutionize galactic military training. Humans weren't super soldiers. They were simply a species that had evolved on a death world so hostile that what the rest of the galaxy considered extreme military training was to them a mildly entertaining afternoon. "Cadet Blackwood," he finally asked, his voice hollow, "what would you consider challenging?" Lex thought for a moment. "Well, there was this one time I tried to teach my grandmother how to use a smartphone. Now, that was tough." The Academy's AI, which had been quietly observing all this, decided to back up its entire consciousness, just in case human insanity proved contagious. "Also," Lex added cheerfully, "I think Mr. Snuggles and friends would make great teaching assistants. They've already learned fetch, stay, and please don't devour the other cadets." Through the window they could see the shadow stalkers playing with a ball of plasma like it was a common toy. One of them was still wearing her boot as a hat. The medical team finally cleared her, largely because they couldn't find anything wrong besides what they now realized were normal human readings, a concept that would keep their research department awake for years to come. As Lex bounded out of medical, followed by her pack of reformed predators, Dr. Vixitel turned to Zix-Klar and whispered, "Should we tell her that those shadow stalkers are actually the evolved form of the galaxy's apex predators?" "At this point," Zix-Klar replied, watching Lex teach deadly creatures how to do synchronized dance moves, "I'm not sure it matters." 1 week after what became known as the incident, the Galactic Military Academy's administration found itself in an unprecedented crisis. The hallways buzzed with chaos as officials scrambled to handle the fallout. "Attention all personnel," the Academy's AI announced through the speakers, its voice carrying a hint of resignation. "The following updates to training protocols are now in effect. Human cadets are required to wear weighted suits to slow them down to reasonable speeds. The sign, Deadly Acid, Do Not Touch, has been revised to add, This means you humans. All obstacle courses must now specify whether they are rated for normal species or Deathworlders. Please stop asking Cadet Blackwood if she can teach your deadly predator pets to do tricks. The betting pool has been officially suspended until we can develop mathematics complex enough to calculate the odds." In his office, Drill Sergeant Zix-Klar sat surrounded by mountains of training manuals, all marked with red, obsolete stamps. His once pristine exoskeleton had developed a nervous tic, causing his left antenna to twitch every time someone said the word human or fun. "Sir," his assistant poked their head in, "the other cadets have, submitted a petition." "Let me guess," Zix sighed, "they all want to transfer out of Lex's training group." "Actually, they're all requesting to train with her. They're calling it Extreme Training, Deathworlder Edition. There's a waiting list." Somewhere in the distance they heard Lex's voice. "All right, Mr. Snuggles, show them your new trick. Good boy. Who's a good harbinger of death? You are." The sound of a supposedly untamable shadow stalker purring like a kitten echoed through the halls. "We've also had to add new warning signs," the assistant continued, checking their list. "My personal favorite is, please do not use toxic gas vents as slip and slides." "What's a slip and slide?" Zixklar asked wearily. "According to the database, it's, oh my." The assistant's color shifted to alarmed chartreuse. "Humans invented a device to deliberately reduce friction with the ground while simultaneously spraying themselves with water for recreational purposes." Zixklar's right antenna joined his left in twitching. The medical bay had been completely renovated, now featuring a special human normal section with signs reading, "Yes, that heart rate is normal. No, they're not dying, they're working out. Please stop calling emergency services when they sweat. The endorphin high is intentional." Even the Academy's cafeteria had been affected, with a new sign above the human section reading, "Warning, contains actual solid matter, meant for consumption. Non-Deathworlders, please keep a safe distance." As Zixklar contemplated his life choices, Lex bounded into his office, followed by her pack of reformed killing machines. Mr. Snuggles was now wearing what appeared to be a friendship bracelet around one of his deadly talons. "Hey, Drill Sergeant," she beamed. "Great warm-up course last week. When do we start the actual training?" The sound of Zixklar's exoskeleton cracking under stress echoed through the building. "Warm up," he managed to squeak. "Yeah, back home we usually do something challenging after warming up, like ultramarathons through active volcanoes, or competitive boulder juggling, or trying to figure out why the printer isn't working." The assistant quietly excused themselves to go scream into the void. "I'm thinking," Lex continued enthusiastically, "we could make the course more interesting. Maybe add some lava. Or how about those cute little temporal paradox generators I saw in storage? Oh, we could make it a team event. Mr. Snuggles and friends could help demonstrate." The pack of shadow stalkers wagged their highly toxic tails in agreement. One of them was wearing a Best Teaching Assistant badge. Zixklar stared at the human, then at his ruined training protocols, then at the reformed apex predators wearing sports equipment, and made a decision. He stood up, straightened his uniform, and walked with dignity to the door. "Where are you going, sir?" his assistant called after him. "To submit my application for reassignment," he replied calmly. "I hear the gas giant atmospheric monitoring station is lovely this time of year." Behind him, he could hear Lex explaining the concept of team-building exercises to her pack of deadly predators. The last thing he heard before his emergency shutdown protocol kicked in was, "So who wants to learn about trust falls?"